This is a full guide on all of these strategies in Roblox Rise of Nations. I'm sure all of you have seen the Rise of Nations wiki. There's a lot of stuff to read over here, but don't worry, I am here to cover all of this. Before I actually start, let me point out that I won't be talking about the beginner's tutorial and the advanced tutorial. I won't be talking about the beginner's tutorial because I feel like it's too basic. It's very basic information that I think most of my viewers already know. I think that the normal tutorial that you get in Ron is pretty good. And for the advanced tutorial, it's just way too much to explain in one video. The video would be way too long. So yeah, if you want me to do an advanced tutorial, make sure to comment that. Grab your snacks and let's get into this. Let's talk about the do's and don'ts. Do not mess with these countries: United States of America, China, India, and Russia. So why you shouldn't mess with these 4 countries is because they have high manpower, have a lot of manpower, they can spam a lot of troops, tanks, whatever, you name it. They have money. The countries are pretty big, so you'd have to take a lot of cities and go through a lot of land, which would make you face attrition, especially if there's terrain like in Russia, or not terrain but biomes. Do not country hop for a dumb reason. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, nothing to explain. Do not let your stability drop down. Stability is very important, but there's a lot of things you can do to keep it high. You can get consumer goods, you can keep your government spending up, and you should probably avoid debt. Produce Navy Assistant. If you're sending a big amount of troops across the ocean, let's take UK to Brazil as an example. Brazil will most likely have a submarine hidden somewhere, and if you don't escort your ships with a destroyer, it will just kill all of your tanks, infantry units in a couple of seconds. So make sure to assist your navy. Train your soldiers. I think that's very self-explanatory as well. Do not be in debt too often. Obviously, your stability will drop by 15%, which is a lot, and countries can declare independence. You can't build buildings, you can't trade, you can't make troops, which are very important to your defense. A lot of unwanted events will occur as well, and good events will be non-existent. What you should try to do to stay away from being in debt: delete unnecessary troops, set your government and research spending to low or none, cancel some unnecessary trades, sell the resources you don't need. Prepare for a Blitzkrieg. What this means is that you should never get too comfortable. Even if you're a huge nation and you're very powerful, you should always watch all of your front lines and make sure that nobody is preparing a surprise attack, because surprise attacks are very, very good. Choose the right ideology. Democracy is great if you want more tax money and you don't feel like invading a lot of people, because when you declare war, your stability will drop by 3%, and if you declare war too fast, you will have releasables declare independence from you and you most likely get bad events. Fascism is good if you need to declare wars often, but if you declare war on a stronger country than you, then it's easier for countries to break free because of the reduced unrest reduction, and it's going to be harder to gain control over people because people can fund rebels in your country. Communism is great if you need more manpower in factories, but the tax income is less, so if you spam too many tanks, you can end up in debt. While that is true, you always get the boost on your factories, which gives you a lot more factory output, and you can always sell your goods from your factories, which will give you more money. So you can still have a huge army, but the upkeep won't be as low as if you were fascist. Put anti-aircraft over your capital and largest cities. This is a very simple thing that a lot of people forget. You should always have some anti-aircraft over your capital and your big cities, because whenever somebody declares war or surprise attacks you, they will most likely try to bomb your big cities or capital to lower your stability and tax income, manpower, and all of the good things that you need. So make sure to have that. Use anti-tank technologies. This is something that you should do, especially in late game, because I feel like tanks are very strong. Early game, they're a lot stronger than infantry, but when infantry is maxed out, usually by 2030, 2035, you should just use the infantry because it's a lot faster and stronger, but that is when it's maxed out. Use a military leader. These are very good. They give a huge boost to your army. You can use leaders on your navy, air force, and your land units. Do not print money. Find another way, through borrowing from other countries or annexing small nations' treasuries if your military isn't that large. Do not accept monopolies. If your country is already corrupt enough, accepting monopolies just gives you instant rampant corruption. Where to invade every continent. If you want to invade North America, you should focus on colonizing one of these 3 countries: Greenland, Jamaica, or Bahamas. Greenland has good resources and they're easy to take, but they're usually needed by the Scandinavian countries. Jamaica has lots of aluminium, they are easy to take, but they are needed by the UK for the British Empire. But the British Empire is rarely formed, so you can go ahead and take Jamaica. Bahamas, small but needed by UK. Again, like, who the fuck takes Bahamas? You know, early game at least. You could also invade the Caribbean islands or Central America. That includes like Dominican Republic, Cuba. For South America, you should invade the Guianas or Venezuela, but I would say that you should probably focus on taking Venezuela and then taking Colombia. If you're unlucky, Brazil would probably take these countries, but you could probably do it quick since most Brazil players are pretty bad. If you want to colonize Europe, you should probably take the Scandinavian countries since they have very good resources, but they are slightly difficult to take and are often invaded by other countries. You could take Ireland, they are very easy to take, but the UK usually wants it. Portugal, very easy to take, but Spain usually conquers it to form the Iberian Union. You could take Spain, they have good resources. Then you have the Balkans, they are pretty easy to take, but Turkey and Italy usually invade them, so I don't know about that one. Then you have the Baltic states, easy to take, but often invaded by Russia. And if you want to be chaotic, I guess just go for Central Europe, and if you die, or you get allies and everyone wants to worship you or something, but that's that. Moving on to Africa. You could take Morocco, very good spot, but it's usually taken by Spain or France. Algeria, same as Morocco. Tunisia, usually taken by France or Italy. South Africa, powerful economic powerhouse, but needed by the UK for the British Empire. But then again, the British Empire is not formed that often, right? But Britain sometimes goes for South Africa, so I guess early game, if you take South Africa, you're pretty good, pretty set. Sierra Leone, a large producer of titanium, but is usually wanted by a lot of other countries. Madagascar, if Sierra Leone is taken and you need the titanium. Egypt, just like South Africa, this can be a very powerful colony. However, it is needed by the UK for the British Empire, but the British Empire is rare, right? So, I mean, you could go ahead and take Egypt. Asia, we have the Middle East, very good. Then we have South Asia. If India isn't a player, Sri Lanka is a good South Asian colony since it's very easy to take due to its small size. For Southeast Asia, you should aim for Cambodia or Laos. Then we have Oceania. I don't know why the hell you would want to colonize that unless you're trying to do some formidable, but most of the countries there, small, shitty, no population, don't go for that, right? Moving on to the next one. AI learning. So this will go over how you can kill the AI troops of a nation. AI abilities. During the war, an AI country will send every single unit to a city in radius of 800 kilometers to recapture it. They will keep doing it until no town in the radius is lost. AI countries will accept white peace regardless of the situation, but no other term unless most of the nation is fully occupied. Some strategies you can use to kill the AI troops of an AI country are breaking entrenchment. So how this will work is that you will send your troops on one of the cities within an 800 kilometer radius of the AI troops. The AI troops then rush your troops that took the city, and you could either wait for your troops to entrench to gain an advantage, or you could rush another force at the AI troops since they aren't entrenched anymore because they moved to recapture that city. Naval interception. If an AI country has an island with a city, you could send your force to take one of those cities, which will force the AI to send their troops through the sea, and then you can use your submarine to kill off the troops in the sea, which is pretty good, especially when it's a lot of troops, let's say like 500k or 1 million. Neutralizing a unit. If you somehow can't break the entrenchment of a unit, it is advised to destroy the unit directly by other types of military other than tanks and infantry. You could use artillery, navy, and aircraft. Sacrificing. This method can be done by using a small force to capture a city. Before the AI recaptures it, it must be scorched to vastly reduce the power of a unit. Deception is simply not telling the truth about your playstyle in-game, and this confuses others about your real intentions. Methods. Flanking. Create a bunch of small split units with auto merge off, say a 160k infantry division for the large division and the 30k division for the split divisions, let's say 5 to 20 of those. Shuffle around the troops like you would with cups, with one holding the prize and the other one having nothing. Justify on your opponent, but make sure your troops reach their place just before declaring war. Once declaring war, shuttle your large division away and make sure they cannot see the numbers of your large division. Select auto capture with your small divisions. With the large division, attack the city you intend to capture, usually a capital. Surprise army. This works well for countries with a lot of cities above 1 million population, such as Japan, the US, India, China, and notoriously Germany. What you're supposed to do is select all of these square cities and then spam tanks, and once they spawn you will have a lot of tanks in one city and you can just split them up into a lot of groups and then rush your enemy. You could do this right as someone invades you or right before you declare war on somebody. Shadow armies. This is a tactic that involves splitting your troops deep inside your country's territory, which will prevent people from seeing how many troops you actually have. And when they can't see your troop count, you could obviously lie that you have like a 20 million infantry division in your capital or some shit like that, and you can threaten them, force them to form alliances with you, or scare them off from invading you. Making players focus on one part. This is a strategy that works very well if the country you are facing is quite large or is just quite dumb. What this basically means is that you send a wall of troops on one side of the country, and while they are focusing on killing that wave of troops or tanks that you sent, you can attack them from another side. This usually works if you're facing a China player and they have land in Europe, and let's say you're fighting them in Europe and you have mainland in Japan. You could easily attack China from the east and take a lot of the important cities. You'll do all of this while they are trying to kill your forces in Europe. If you train your troops very good and they have good technology, you could even probably win wars on two sides. So yeah. Submarine warfare. Submarines are the only unit that can become invisible to the enemy. They are the ultimate masters of deception. Transport sabotage. This is a strategy that involves placing submarines in unlikely places to be discovered. Then you wait for your enemy to send their infantry or tanks through the sea, and then you send your submarines in for the kill. But this will only work if the enemy is overconfident or does not guard his transport with escort ships. Submarine baiting. A technique that targets the enemy capital ships. It requires a destroyer out in the open to lure in enemy battleships. Once the battleships get close, send your submarines in for the kill. This will help you achieve naval superiority over the enemy. Gap abuse. Gap abusing is abusing the difference in speed between their escorts and transport. It's like an escort mission, where your running speed is faster than their walking speed and your walking speed is slower than their walking speed. I don't know how that made sense, but I just read what it says on the wiki. Okay, now I'll let you listen to my brain explaining this. So if you didn't get that, that basically means if they're sending a large navy, or let's say a battleship, a destroyer, and a submarine, along with like 10,000 tanks across the Pacific, you could use a submarine to abuse the speeds between those three ships that your enemy has. Obviously, the tanks will go a lot slower, so you could use that to your advantage and try to catch them with your submarine. But of course, this is pretty hard to do since, if they're sending a navy that huge along with an escort, I think that they are good enough to realize that you are trying to snipe them with a submarine. So yeah, I don't know if you want to do this, but you could try. The art of speech. Some players don't use the chat, but there are many times where it could prove crucial in deceiving your opponent. Encouraging underestimation. You should lie about your manpower by saying, I have no MP. You could lie about your money, say that you are in debt, which could be exposed if you are pretty high in the rankings. But you can always say, I have such a high deficit, it is draining my money. That would be harder to be exposed. You could lie about your stability, act like a noob, say stuff like how to use artillery, lie about bad events in your nation. What a mess, I have so much. Alright, shut the fuck up. Next one. Deception for allies. This one may or may not work, but its main element is dragging your targeted ally to war and taking them without any of their big allies interfering. To do this form of deception, it will be based on one ally of yours that allied literally everyone in the server. First, find an AI ally of theirs which only has minimal allies that are either weaker or another of your ally. For example, the AI is Albania who allies Italy and you are France needing your ally Italy for your formable. You declare war at Albania and take over Italy during the process. This works best with capital sniping. Notes to remember. What you should remember is that your troops must not be in allied land or else the declaration won't happen. You have a higher chance of losing if the target ally is better than you. However, if you do lose, you can always white peace the AI country you declared war on, which will auto accept the white peace. Deception for allies too. So how this would go is that Spain would declare war on the UK and then you will white peace Spain, which would cause Spain to then send you an ally request and then a war request. But of course, it's up to you to accept the ally request and the war request. So you could just leave Spain alone against the UK. I guess this is what Deception for Allies 2 means. I'll leave it on the screen because I might have understood this differently. I don't know, but you can read through it if you want to, but that's my explanation for it. Moving on, war reparations. When you get called to a war against someone, you can send war reparations as the enemy will try to accept all the white pieces, meaning there's a chance he will overlook that you sent war reparations instead of white peace. Now you get 20% of the enemy's income. Congratulations, free money. Trade. Buy a resource, one that you don't have much of, from an AI country at 1 times value. Afterwards, choose a player nation that has a lot of that resource and sell that resource at 4 times value or whatever value you want to sell it at. But not too high. Try to keep it low enough so it does not cause a deficit or raise suspicion in the target nation. Chances are they overlook the fact that you are selling the resource and not buying it. To make it even more intriguing, specify in chat that you want to buy that resource at the specific value. Repeat this process until it eventually works. If it works, the only thing that stops it is if they notice that their income is severely lowered, they get conquered, or you run out of the resource. This strategy can net you millions of dollars every turn. How to be strong in a new server. Economic. Even if you have quite good starting economy, you must always make 2 to 4 electronic factories and 1 steel and motor factories. Maybe make a fertilizer factory or 2 if you have the money or resources, and even some civilian factories to boost stability. Expand your land or trade with other countries if you didn't have enough resources. Doing all of this when you start as a democratic nation and want to conquer stuff is very much recommended. Military. Alright, this part had pretty bad English, so I'll just explain it myself. After you've gotten your electronics from the factories, you should obviously sell them to AI countries. Then you should buy oil if you don't produce a lot, because you need oil to have tanks, infantry, destroyers, submarines, or even battleships. Then use your military power to recruit military leaders. And here's a tip: 4 attackers will completely destroy a unit if it's in the sea. So make sure to send them if you see an enemy ship transporting across the sea, right? Well, it obviously still works on units that are on land, but it's not as overpowered. So, I mean, you can still use it. It's a very good strategy. Expansion. This is vital for resources and more tax gain or manpower. With your newfound and early power, you can surprise attack a nation you want or need, even if it's a player. If they are preoccupied with another matter, use capital sniping to defeat them swiftly with your army. This works best for Germany and China. Defense. After having enough regiments, you should be warned that enemies can come and slice you before you can even touch your nail into another country. If you are the ruler of a small country, give a zone a regiment. Bigger countries would need to span their army near their borders to defend. But if you're stronger than them, you can use the pre-camped forces to flank them. Don't forget to train your military, build forts, and use entrenchment and terrain to your advantage. Colonies. If you need them for a formable or just simply more expansion, you should probably do this. For example, you are France and have knocked out the Germans and formed Frankish Empire. Better take Algeria for oil and Tunisia for phosphate. The Blitzkrieg. Probably the best part of this whole video. Preparation. In this method, you cannot mass your troops at the border of the nation you want to attack like most people do, but rather gather enough supplies to quickly make an army. Tanks are the unit that you should use the most in this method. Be sure you have enough steel and motor parts to produce the tanks. Some good things to think about when doing the Blitzkrieg is that you shouldn't get a lot of attention. People shouldn't expect this, and if you want to justify on someone, don't justify on them directly. Justify on their ally, and then you'll attack their ally and get it drawn into a war with them, right? That's how it works. Starting the war. Around 30 seconds before you start the war, you should begin making tanks and bomb enemy cities using bombers. If you can afford it, obviously, because bombers are very expensive. As soon as you are done making the tanks and planes, declare war. Then immediately mass select the units and set them to auto-capture the target nation. If the enemy has aircraft, create anti-air units near your biggest cities and factories, because you will get less income if they get bombarded. The war. The tanks will at least manage to take a quarter of the nation in the worst case scenario, and half of it in the best case, before the enemy begins to resist. But it won't really matter to you, as you are ready for war. Just keep calm and let them exhaust their manpower. It is crucial that you do not waste your manpower pool, because that will cause you to become unprepared for a possible enemy counteroffensive. When you are nearly in total control of their nation, they will probably panic and start spamming units, which will work to your advantage. Finally, you will either 1. Take over most of that nation and then annex that part when the nation accepts your treaty. 2. Take over all of it and annex them. You can force a peace deal on the enemy if you occupy 90% or more of their cities. If the enemy manages to foresee your Blitzkrieg offensive and they make a defensive, attempt to distract any army divisions they could have placed by sending a wave of infantry or tanks at them. This will give your other units time to quickly sweep through the enemy's country. Counter strategy. Like all strategies, there are different ways to counter the Blitzkrieg. First tip is to be aware of your surrounding countries. You'll want to make sure you watch what your neighbors are doing and if they are acting suspiciously. Bonus points if you have somebody tell you that an enemy is going to attack your country. Consider creating sonar stations so you can see any submarines near your coast. Be prepared for the unexpected. If you're out invading multiple countries, try to keep part of your army back for defense, especially near your capital city. With the Blitzkrieg, usually your enemy will send 10 to 20k troops and 200 to 600 tanks at you rapidly, depending on the country's size and economic ability. With a defense stronger than their Blitzkrieg, you'll have enough time to bring your main forces to the front line. You can additionally utilize concentration of the force to defeat each enemy element one by one. Use strategic unit placement to help you prepare. For example, place your artillery on a city surrounded by mountainous terrain, so that the enemy troops will take heavy damage before they reach the city and destroy the artillery. You can also research support range 1, which will increase the range of artillery fire. Ask your allies for help if you desperately need it. If the Blitzkrieg begins to go in favor of your enemy, try seeing if any of your allies close by can hold the front line or create a fallback line in time. Don't be afraid if you feel like a wimp for calling on your allies. Research the anti-tank tree for your infantry. The anti-tank research tree can greatly increase your infantry units' effectiveness against tanks, making them powerful enough to even wipe out entire tank squads if entrenched. Watch the weather. Your plans to invade can all be destroyed if you attempt to attack in the winter. For example, you are attacking Russia from China, you should invade in April, so that by the time it is November, you have conquered Siberia, taken Russia's oil reserves, and can prepare to siege Moscow. Of course, one thing you can't change is the Arctic biome, and you shouldn't worry too much about that. The Arctic biome contains a fraction of the global population, and therefore it isn't a really big deal if it takes time to conquer. Some things to remember about the Blitzkrieg. Don't be careless about this method. Always make sure to have your border defended by some sort of units in case your enemy's allies reach your homeland. Don't overdo the war and exhaust your manpower, or there is a good chance that you will lose. Make sure not to enter into deficit, or you'll find yourself in debt within the blink of an eye. If you think you are going to fall into large debt or deficit early on in the war, then you need to question if the war is really worth it. You also need to make sure you have good policies in place and running factories. Don't only use auto capture. When your troops approach a large city, move lots of troops into it to capture it. Many square cities are hard to capture with small units. Capital sniping. Capital sniping is a strategy in which players capture their enemy's capital to disrupt their stability and economy massively. As soon as you take your enemy's capital, you keep your troops there to increase their defense damage through entrenchment. You may send more troops there as reinforcements. The idea behind this is that taking your enemy's capital will have a huge impact on their stability, economy, and manpower. This will most likely cause them to collapse or at least hurt their war effort. Some people use this strategy while swarming their enemy with other troops to make sure the enemy isn't able to produce troops for defense. It is very useful against superpowers with large or many releasables, such as USA and especially China. If you're a smaller country and are unable to keep the captured capital, you can scorch their capital. However, for major impact, you must hold the capital for as long as possible. So keeping artillery to hold off enemy sieges is a good idea. Pre-capturing. I'll leave the wiki explanation on the screen, but I will explain it in a simple way. So what this is basically that you ally the country. Let's say, for example, I'm France and I ally Germany and I put my troops in Berlin. Because, you know, they don't attrition because we're allied, right? Then I look through the list of allies that Germany has. Let's say Germany's allied with the UK. So if I declare war on the UK, I'll get into a war with Germany. And I already have forces on their capital. And if they don't see that before the war, I'll instantly take their capital. So it's just a, you know, sneaky thing. Of course, this wouldn't work if they notice I'm putting troops on their capital. Even if we're allies, it's just something weird, right? Pincer. The Pincer is a military strategy in Rise of Nations. The Pincer can be used to both capture and recapture cities fast. The Pincer involves a large amount of units concentrated in one city along the border. When you are ready to mount the offense, select the units and begin to shift-click along aligned cities perpendicular to the border. Note: this strategy works best when focusing on square cities, so you should make sure to include those in your line. After the troops have entered and captured the line of cities, select them again and set them to auto-capture. You should create multiple of these pincers. This strategy is most effective when used with capital rushing, as it opens a corridor of cities for your soldier sets to march straight to the capital. This strategy should be used with tanks and infantry and should be followed up with a full front-wide assault. Russian Rush. The Russian Rush is a strategy to weaken units to have time for reinforcements to be created. In this strategy, you are going to be on the defensive, and you need to be prepared. Using this strategy, you can hold off the enemy while you bring reinforcements or fortify your border. Preparing for the worst. First, you must look around you. Identify potential enemies. The requirements to survive are the following: large manpower pool, a good general, max anti-tank tech tree, ideology good for military, for example fascism or communism. The beginning of the end. First, you must select cities, maximum of 50 to prevent your troops from combining. Do this near the border with your enemy. It is recommended doing it from the top down, as shown in this image. Credit goes out to this dude. After you have selected, you must spam as many troops as possible. It is more effective with massed attack. Assign these troops to your general, then select auto capture and hope for the best. While you are doing this, you should have brought reinforcements to the front line. After reinforcements have arrived, you can begin a push, as your enemies have likely been weakened. Just make sure to watch your stability and war exhaustion so you don't collapse. It is recommended to get policies such as the Welfare Act, or if you are desperate, martial law. Obviously, after doing this, your losses will be huge, but it will be worth it in the end. Slash and Burn. Slash and Burn is a strategy in which an opposing nation captures portions of an enemy nation, and to kill any troops attempting to annex your land. This strategy allows you to pull back and train more troops in order to continue an attack, while watching your enemy's stability crumble. Strategy: gather a decent amount of infantry in small groups. Once you declare war on the nation, quickly take as much land as possible. Once the enemy troops enter your recently captured cities, make sure to burn as many cities as possible. If executed properly, enemy troops will suffer attrition and begin to die out, and the enemy stability will begin to lower, having disastrous effects on countries with multiple releasables, with China suffering the worst. While the enemy burns, take your time to sort out your country. Rebuild your army, or even negotiate with the enemy. Counter strategy. Typically, the enemy will send cheaper units to capture your land and will pull back when they are ready to burn. You have to be on your toes and recapture your cities as fast as possible. If they do succeed in scorching, pull back and up your government spending. You should already be having your government spending at max, but increase it to as high as you can if you don't have it maxed out already. Train your troops and continue to sort your country and prepare for an attack or defense. Burn and Seed, a rather frowned upon strategy where a country burns portions of its land and cedes it to other nations, forcing countries to deal with stability loss without war. This strategy is pretty annoying, but the people that do it weaken their countries in the process. If you decide to do this, you have to give considerable amount of land with cities, so you will have to decide whether or not the manpower gain, economy and cities of your nations is worth the small change of toppling another nation. Things to keep in mind: your troops are also affected by burning cities and will also take attrition. Scorching your cities will lower your stability, so be careful not to burn your own cities by mistake. Burning cities will not be able to produce troops nor land aircraft units. Cities that have been scorched cannot be scorched again for a period of time. Submarine Baiting. I already went through this one earlier in this video, but there's another one on the wiki, so I guess it's worth reading, and it's short as well. So, Submarine Baiting is a strategy that can be very useful if you use it. Submarine baiting is when you bait someone's troops into the water and take them out with subs. It is recommended that you back your subs up with destroyers. If they have battleships to kill your destroyers, sink them with subs. If they spam destroyers, use artillery to sink them. This strategy is most popular with Taiwan. Taiwan starts with a reasonable amount of money and most people use it to make a navy. A navy is important for an island country. The right way to build a navy as Taiwan is to build destroyers, subs and artillery. When you are done, kill their troops, you rush Beijing and burn it. After that, what should happen is a China explosion, or a King explosion. A China or King explosion is when China explodes into a bunch of countries such as Tibet, Shaanxi, Guangxi, Fujian, Manchuria, Xinjiang, and Anhui. My pronunciation might have been a bit bad or complete dog shit, but I did spend like 2 minutes trying to pronounce them. I went on Google, alright? World Conquest is a state of a server when one country owns the entire world. Proof. The easiest way to confirm a world conquest is to look into the rankings screen. If there's no country in the second position, that means the country in the first position owns the entire world. Strategies. The key to achieve a world conquest is patience. Wow, no shit, might take you 10 hours, alright? Just remember that there are 1,212 nations in the game. That means that on a private server, you need to justify 211 times. On a public server, the number goes down a lot faster because there are on average 14 players on the server, so this is why it's faster to do it on a public server. Strategies to achieve world conquest can be either aggressive or peaceful, or either one with a few elements of the other one. Nation. The best nation for this is an isolated and powerful nation like South Africa. Why South Africa? Because it has tungsten, which is a rare resource, and there's titanium nearby since Madagascar is very close to South Africa. South Africa has weak neighbors. The nearest potential threat is Democratic Republic of the Congo or Nigeria. Plus, not many people play as African countries, giving you an easy advantage fighting against AI. If you eliminate those two threats, your only threats will be overseas nations. Although overseas nations are far away, they will not hesitate to destroy you easily due to South Africa being a prime target sometimes. As of the nuke update, South Africa has become even better due to its high uranium production. You can also conquer Madagascar for even more uranium, but nonetheless a very powerful nation. Some other good options are China and Russia. Before you go further, you should first have a big economy, at least 10 million, and make sure that you aren't in deficit when transporting units over water. You should also have lots of manpower. Doing this can be achieved by developing all your cities multiple times. It is also recommended that you have a great military leader, and another one in reserve because you will be fighting a lot and the chances of your leader dying are high. You should have all research technology researched, and the entire tank and infantry tree. It is also recommended to have some research done in the economic tree. Ideology. The best ideology to pick if you want to achieve a world conquest is fascism. Communism is good too, but you should be careful with your economy if you pick this. The peaceful way. This way is slower, but you don't risk that much like with the aggressive way. In this strategy, you ally all nations that are controlled by a player. Then, go conquer all AI nations. And then wait until the players leave and annex their countries. Then conquer the remaining AI nations and you have achieved a world conquest. Pretty boring way. Why would you be peaceful? There's no point in being in the game. Just invade everyone. Turn the server into a chaotic place. Camping. Camping is a defensive method in which you concentrate most of your military in a single fortified city. This only works if you use this method correctly. How it works. Camping is a relatively easy method to use. To sum it up, you gather all your forces in one of your cities and wait for them to become entrenched. If enemy forces come too close, they will be wiped out. Although this method isn't that simple, it requires some better planning and deception. Now you will learn how to use this correctly. Usage. Defensively. Let's say you are fighting a war against a stronger player nation, and you are losing. You are forced to retreat. Gather all your forces at a single city with fortifications if you can afford them. Preferably camp in a larger city. Now this should work against most normal ground forces. But if the enemy has enough numbers, they can crush you even if you are entrenched. Although usually the enemy will lose if you have enough forces entrenched in the city. Make sure you have artillery and anti-air units in your city too, as these are very important to have if you want to hold out against the enemy. Usage. Offensively. Now the offensive usage of this tactic can be risky, but could also win you the war. Let's say you have 500k entrenched troops and 1k entrenched tanks in your city, and an enemy division of 50k strays close to your city. If there aren't any stronger enemy divisions near enough to respond, then attack the enemy infantry and you should suffer minimal losses. If you keep using this method, you could bait the enemy into rushing your city with massive amount of troops, resulting in a victory. Or they might wipe peace if they realize they can't conquer your city. Usage. Counter-offensively. This is a continuation of the offensive section. Let's say you have defeated large portions of the enemy troops from the above methods, and you feel confident in initiating a counter-offensive. The first thing you want to do is scout out the enemy's troops to see how many troops each enemy division has. Use fighters to scout out the enemy, as not much can counter it except for more fighters or anti-air units. Now that you know the enemy's position and numbers, move all your forces at once, but keep some defending your capital. This should surprise the enemy, and at best send them into a state of panic. Use the Blitzkrieg tactic with tanks followed by troops, but have bombers and attackers move forwards to the enemy troops with fighter escorts. If you spot entrenched enemy divisions, bring artillery in behind forces to bombard the divisions. Make sure your artillery has lots of range so your forces protecting it don't get too close. And if the enemy rushes at your artillery, they will have to defeat your now mostly entrenched troops defending the artillery. Keep this strategy going and you should be able to defeat the enemy, using deception to your advantage. While using this tactic, keep auto-merge off and split up forces a bit, but keep them in the same spot. Doing this can deceive the enemy, and they won't be able to see your artillery and anti-air guns. They will likely get overconfident and try to rush you, only to be destroyed by hidden artillery, or they might try to send attackers only to be destroyed by hidden fighters and anti-air. Although never underestimate the power of your enemy, as sometimes a few artillery units or anti-air guns won't be enough to repel the attack, and could lead to a defeat. So always make sure you have sufficient amount of units to repel an attack. This can also work offensively, as the enemy might see you as being solely on the defensive, and start capturing cities near you. If enemy divisions get too close, attack them. But remember to keep your artillery and anti-air behind your infantry and tanks and closer to the cities. These units are extremely valuable and should be protected, but not at the cost of all your other units. Extra information. For this strategy, make sure to research your artillery range and firepower. Mobility doesn't matter in this case. Train your troops if you can, as that can help you fend off a mass attack. Also, if you have a city in mountainous, jungle, or Arctic terrain, you should camp there, as it will take longer for troops to get to the city and can give your artillery time to inflict damage to the approaching forces. Also make sure to research anti-tank for your infantry, as players usually blitzkrieg with tanks, and get anti-aircraft in case there are any planes thrown at you. How to defend against large countries. I know that I've done like a whole video on this topic, but I'm just gonna go through it again since it's on the wiki, right? So everyone that plays this game knows how annoying it is to be annexed by a country much bigger than you. How to defend against infantry and tanks. The first thing you should do is become allies with the superpowers. If a superpower has a faction, try to join it. Next, you should research anti-tank and hire in the infantry branch, which will protect you from enemy tanks. Strong countries are sure to have tanks. After this, you need to start training lots of troops. All your major cities should have divisions of 100k troops. Change this number depending on the size of your country, economy, and your enemies. While that is happening, fortify all your cities, or if you are a big country, all your major cities. Build some artillery to keep in range of the enemy troops, but well out of the action. Because once troops or tanks get to your artillery, the artillery will be defeated. Try to train your forces as much as you can without going into depth. You should also use electronics and fertilizer factories to sell and get more money. What will most likely happen? With tanks. With the tanks will probably move in quickly and try to take your cities, but then will be met by an entrenched force of anti-tank superiors and will most likely all die. But be wary, they may have artillery to take out your troops first. If this is the case, you need to make a whole different division of troops to attack the artillery. Without the tanks, they will most likely use infantry, and you should like this, as they will be easily destroyed by your infantry. The artillery will rip up the enemy infantry and you'll be victorious. How to defend against aircraft. This one's a bit easier. You have to find out if they have any aircraft, and if they do, train 5 anti-aircraft units for each of the cities with a factory and your major cities. Once they have finished training, place 5 anti-aircraft on every one of your major cities or cities with factories on them. Also do some spying if you want to. If they have bombers, you should of course use anti-air, place them in cities you want to defend, upgrade the support tree in technology, optional but recommended, train them, also optional but recommended. If they have attackers, you should use anti-air, put them with your whatever you want to defend, upgrade the support tree in technology, optional but recommended, train them, highly recommended. How to defend if you're an island. If you're an island, there is only one thing to do. Fortify your capital and entrench a 40k division. Also make that division start training. When you are an island, you're surrounded by water, so you need to make a navy. So then you can defend in the water. You need 3 submarines, 3 destroyers, and 1 battleships. And try to do this without a deficit, but if you run into a deficit, ask for some money to hold up your treasury or use the AI selling technique. Once you've done that, start training all these ships. Also, you can start to upgrade the navy tree in the technology section. When the invasion happens, you need to watch what they are doing, because you need to move the battleship around your island so that nothing gets through. But make sure the destroyers and submarines cover the whole island. Once you see their ships, brace yourself. But what should happen is the enemy will send transports and the transports will be destroyed by the submarines. Then the enemy will send some destroyers to destroy your submarines, but then you should send your battleship to kill the destroyers. The enemy will send submarines to destroy the battleships, but then your destroyers will destroy the submarines. Well, technically true, but numbers in this case will matter a lot. If he has 3 battleships, he fucks your whole navy. He just needs a couple of battleships and destroyers. That's it. You don't have a lot of money, you don't have a huge economy, right? Terrain, biome, and territorial shape. People tend to not think about using your geography to its full extent. Your nation's terrain, biome, and territorial shape can hugely affect defending your nation. With the right terrain, you can slow down your enemies while you slowly down them with artillery. With the right biome, you don't even have to fight that much, with attrition doing the damage to your enemies. And with territorial shape, you can have your warships and artillery to bombard the enemy on your coastal areas. Subjugation war. This strategy is very infuriating, especially when your opponents realize once it's too late. As most people know, if you declare war or conquest on another nation, that nation will now have an opportunity to annex your land should you fail. What most don't know is that if you declare a subjugation war and fail, yes, you'll become a puppet, but you still keep your lands. How it works: simply justify a subjugation war. Country size doesn't matter. Once justified, simply declare war. Get the enemy to overextend and waste manpower and money. If you want, you can take out the enemy troops, but don't attempt to retake your lands. While they annex your land, put up your government spending and your research spending. Make sure you no longer make money. Give away all your money. The war is now finished. As your enemy sends terms, they'll realize they don't have an annex all captured lands option. There is no money to take and no money for reparations. You have succeeded. Yes, you may become a puppet, but they wasted resources for no gain other than a useless puppet. Either leave the game or stay in the server and rebuild. Leapfrogging or island hopping. As most people know, if a country is player controlled, it cannot be forced to surrender until most cities are annexed. You can still annex lands during war as well. To start, you need a nation. Only smaller nations should use this strategy, but size doesn't matter. Train up some infantry and some ships if you can spare. Simply justifying conquest or subjugation on nation of choice. Size doesn't matter. Before you declare, or they do, make sure you have annexed or are currently annexing small island nations. They are all over the map, so they shouldn't be hard to find. All you have to do is continue capturing islands, forcing your opponent to find and annex the islands. If you somehow run out of islands or small nations to annex, simply route back and recapture one of your islands. Sea travel is not cheap. And if you're not careful, you quickly lose your army, so be careful. Your opponent can either annex your lands quicker than you can annex new lands, or somehow come to an agreement with you. Things to keep in mind. All of the information above is useless without a good economy, stability, resources, or manpower. One quick thing is that I won't go through these 4 things, because I feel like they're not needed in order to be a good player. So yeah, that was the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe because this took me a while to make. And yeah, let's hit 20k before June. That's the goal. If we can't hit it, well, I can't do anything. But if you enjoyed this, make sure to watch my other guides. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video.